Well, hello, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to Get Set Up's special event. It's called Creating a World for All Ages, and Deborah Gale is here with us today. My name is Deb, and I'm your Get Set Up guide, and I'll be your host for today. So, we're a community of active older adults, and as a community of active older adults, who are looking to stay connected, we're really thrilled to have Deb with us today to talk about intergenerational design and its importance in today's world. So before we get started, I just want to cover a few housekeeping details. For those who are tuning in live today through our Get Set Up Zoom class, please remember to keep yourself muted during the session, but do keep your cameras on if you're comfortable so that we can enjoy connecting with each other. You know, it just builds our community. And then we'll also be capturing some images to share in the future. So it's just fun and relaxed session. And it's nice to see your friendly faces on the screen. If you have clarifying questions while Deb is speaking, please let us know in the chat. We're going to be monitoring that as we go along, and we're going to do our very best to call them to her attention. So we're going to have time to take questions for Deb directly from you in the second part of our hour. So for those of you who are joining via our community live stream on Get Set Up TV or on Facebook or on YouTube, you're welcome to enter questions into the comments. We'll do our best to address those questions as well. Okay, so now let's get on to our special guest. Welcome, Deb. Deborah Gale embarked upon her latest quest for purpose about 10 years ago. She went back to school and got a second master's in public policy and aging. And now she is a gerontologist researcher for two social enterprises. And those enterprises are the Age of No Retirement and Encore Fellows UK. Now, I found it interesting to know that she did this after raising 5 daughters that were born within 5.5 years of each other. And this included 2 sets of twins. And she also moved back and forth across the Atlantic 5 times. So, wow, that's a lot of energy. That was after she got an MBA and worked in Silicon Valley, where she was Apple Computer's international treasury manager. So Deborah's got quite a resume. So Deb's intentional aging strategy is to mute the negatives around aging that we experience while nurturing every opportunity to support intergenerational relationships across the entire course of our lives. So Deb, welcome to Get Set Up.
Thanks, Deb. It's great to be here.
It's so nice to have you here. And we just heard from your bio, but tell us a little bit more about the story behind what brought you to this point in your career. What motivated your career change like 10 years ago?
My 3 eldest daughters were just getting ready to go off to university. They're born within 18 months of each other. And so it was kind of an interesting time to kind of reassess. And, I had always been itching to do something different, but I wasn't quite clear on what I wanted to do. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to go back to work because, that is what I'd like to be income earning again. Mm-hmm. And I could talk myself into every interview that I went into. But at the end of the interview, it'd be like, they didn't know what to do with me. I didn't know what to do with, what was being presented to me. And it's kind of like, I didn't know what I wanted to do. And so I had a conversation with my husband, and I was kind of driving him crazy. And so he said, go back to school, do something. And I think he thought I was going to do a creative writing degree because I always liked to write. And instead, I really tapped into something that I hadn't touched since my undergraduate days, where I was a social work and home economics major. And the home economics was kind of a crazy thing just because my older sister had been, but the social work and the public policy angle was really interesting to me. So I kind of offer that as a part of the reason why I'm doing the things that I do now, because there's something that has been burning inside of you or buried deep within you that you haven't been allowed to tap into for a long time. And so it becomes like for me, it became a way for me to scratch an itch. And it was, the most incredible experience of my adult life. going back to school as a mature student.
I can imagine that, like me, there are a lot of members of this audience who are just shaking their head. Like, yes, I can really
Yeah.
relate to that, really relate to that. So what did you learn from the changes that you made that could help guide those of us who are maybe looking for a career change or haven't had the chance or the courage to think about one at this point?
The first thing I learned was that my confidence was on the floor. That
Mm,
I had, like I was buzzing around like a, mad woman, with, if you've got 5 car seats going at the same time, you learn to multitask and you learn to do all sorts of things. And but I but I knew that again that there was going to be something that was compelling about this decision that I'd made to go back to school, because it led to so many great things. Because first of all, I mean, you're terrified all the time, because if your confidence is at the bottom, you're really looking for something that will give you purpose. Let's start there.
mm.
And so you have a situation where your learning curve is on a perpendicular. I hadn't even set foot in King's College until the day I started, because I applied so late that I wasn't even sure that, it was a really, that's a funny side story, but they basically said, in the conversation we've had with you, you've already given us your purpose statement. So as long as you're not lying about your previous degrees, then you're probably going to be in. So when I arrived, I was like, okay, this is great, this is wonderful. But I mean, even just a regular commute into London, which is something I hadn't done, on a regular basis, became it became more exciting and interesting every time I did it through the seasons, because you would just, it was different and it was wonderful. And I actually wrote a blog during that time, because the whole train behaviors of people and commuter behaviors was so funny, because everybody's got their seat and they sit there every day. And, it was I mean, that was very interesting. The whole commuting into London experience again was wonderful. And entering the course as a mature student was really, and looking at longevity was for me a way of thinking about the fact that there's a whole slew of older baby boomers getting older, and they're not yet old really, and they're going to want to do something. So I think that we really should start thinking about what we can do with these people. So that was one of the most important sort of things that precipitated the change.
So what do you think what did you learn during that process that would give members of this group the courage to go for
Well,
it?
so this is my truth, but this is, I think, will resonate with a lot of people that are listening in. So lots of people get stuck. You get stuck, and the trick is to figure out how to get unstuck. And I was lucky enough to find something that I was interested in. And I'll go back to that point I made earlier, is that like all during your life, you hopefully have a hobby or something, or you've had something that has been always a little bit of a burning desire in you. But because of the way our lives are predicated now, or predestined, it was almost like you had to get on the treadmill. We know the whole linear life course model has been blown up, but at least when we were first starting out, you've got your education, you got a job, you were at the coalface for 30, 40 years. And then because you had an economic imperative that would make it absolutely essential for you to keep a roof over your head, keep food on the table and everything else. But then later in life, when you get a little bit more bandwidth to look at your life, then hopefully you've got a chance to kind of look at things through a different lens, and hopefully shift into something that you feel that you're more destined to have done, and it actually feeds your soul, rather than all the other things that you've been doing for the other 30 years of basically keeping alive.
Those years that may have just been the grind and not really something that you wanted to do, but you found that it was something that paid the bills and you did it and you were on track because that's what you went to school for, whatever it may have been. But now it's your time. Now it's our time to go back and think about what's our passion and how do we move that into something that really feels fulfilling.
Yeah, and that's really a problem, because again, I mean, having been in the US and the UK systems, which are so different from each other, In the US, you've got a little bit more time to figure out what you'd like to do, but still countless people, end up with the wrong degree, end up in a job that they don't really, like I said, doesn't feed your soul or whatever. And so you basically become, you're living a half life, and you're trying to, you're just making, it's a means to an end rather than a something that is fulfilling and that is giving you purpose. And we're going to talk a lot about purpose in this, because that's the defining characteristic for anybody who has lived long enough. You've got to keep finding purpose.
Finding purpose. So that takes us right into the next question about what does the age of no retirement mean?
Well, I actually was involved in the age of no retirement from its inception, from its inaugural event. I was not the founder or the co-founder. There's two fantastic people, Dr. Jonathan Cawley and Georgina Lee, who have the bravery and courage, which is also which is needed at this stage in our lives, to basically say, okay, we have a situation where longevity is a reality, and nobody is saying, what are we going to do with all these over 50-year-olds? I mean, it was kind of like the discussion just stopped. When you think about it, when you are, I don't know whether this annoys everybody else, but when you're filling out a form and it says 18 to 34, 34 to 50, and then 50 plus, it's kind of like, then all of a sudden you just have this, this complete cliff edge where you're supposed to fill in the next 40, 50 years of your life, particularly if, as Andrew Scott has proposed, we're going to have a 100-year life. We better start thinking about what we're going to do about this extra time that we've been gifted. And it's not a gift at the end of your life, because at the end of your life, I mean, you're, hopefully you are in a secure, hopefully safe environment. But the extra time that you get is really here in the middle of your life. And what are we going to do? Maybe when you have less financial responsibilities, when you have less children to worry about, all those things. So it becomes this, really rich time. And so the age of no retirement was really kind of if I use Mary Oliver, I'll quote her and say, what are we going to do with our one wild and precious life? And that is, that was kind of that's my putting my spin on the age of no retirement, but that was really the way I looked at it. And so they were also questioning why it was some 60 years, I think, since Robert Butler had coined the term ageism. And since he'd written the book, it was a Pulitzer Prize winner, called Why Survive? And it was about aging in America. And that was the big question, why survive? Because things were so bad, and he was really, and in the early part, he got much more positive, but he thought, we're going to have all these older people, they're all going to have dementia, there's going to be all sorts of problems, so much pressure on the social system. And actually we're seeing that that's really not the case, and that we're a lot more vibrant, more viable, and everything else. So the original intention, I guess, of the age of no retirement was a social movement to create a new narrative surrounding aging, to stop the whole negative everything, and make policymakers and academics stop ignoring the over 50 population, because there was a lot more going in there. Because policymakers have been contemplating these questions for a long time. It's not like the realization that people were living longer has just happened. And so we just thought that there had to become a more compelling reason to keep older people in work, and not to push them into a forced retirement or retirement early. And so as a movement for social change, it was really facing a lot of negative media and, again, just cultural stereotypes. I mean, just think about everything that birthday cards are gendered, of course, but are very ageist, and, make you feel like you don't have anything to live for sometimes. And I mean, even if you look at Gina Davis, the actress, has done amazing things with pointing out the gaps in terms of character representations of older women in film. And if you look at the representations in TV, and it's not just women, it's men, and and so the whole way we think about age is it's been stuck into very, very structured lines, and we thought that needs to be blown up. And the only stories you ever hear about anybody, this is changing, but it used to be you'd only hear about the centenarian skydiver, or the, somebody that was, as Malcolm Gladwell would call, an outlier. And there's a lot of very interesting normal people doing normal, great things. There's normal people of a certain age that are entrepreneurs, that are doing startups, that are creative, that are doing amazing volunteer work. But instead of saying, hey, old Joe or old Sue just did a startup, isn't that crazy? Why can't it just be Sue just started a startup, or they just started a creative enterprise? So we have to change it's really changing the whole mindset about growing older, which was what the Age of No Retirement tried to do. And so with some funding from the Big Lottery Fund, they were able to do some very compelling research. And the research basically considered so many things, but took 2,000 people between the ages of 18 and 99 and asked them about all of the microaggressions in their lives. Like, what were the things that, really got them, inflamed, upset, whatever. And, anything from how fast life was going, or not being able to keep up with technology, or being, not having enough time to do the things you wanted to do, or not being fulfilled at work. All of those things were felt. It didn't matter whether you were 25 or 65. It was statistically, we found no difference. And so what that really teased out was that there's so much more in common.
Yes, yes. So there are those myths. I was watching some of the interviews that you had with the D&I squad, and you were talking about the myths that still perpetuate out there. And one of those was the myth that older and younger folks can't work together, can't communicate very effectively. What do you see?
Well, that's, it's, first of all, we are debunking it every day. But if you think about the very genesis of that idea, that where did we get that? Older and younger workers have worked together side by side since the year dot. This is not anything new. This is, you've always had apprentices and interns, and you've always had all, different people where the experience and wisdom and everything of the older generation would be bestowed or whatever. But what has changed, I think, is that the pace of technological change and the speed of it has created the digital world. And so older people aren't as facile or au fait with the digital world. But that whole thing got blown up with the pandemic, because we found very quickly the adaptive capabilities of everybody. Because it's kind of like, to this day, I still can't run the remote on for the TV. I mean, I can get a few things, but I'm not, it takes me forever and I have to really think about everything. But, you hand it, that's because I used to have 6 people in this house that would never let me hold it anyway. And so I never needed to. But as soon as you need to do something, all of a sudden the impetus to do it becomes more apparent. And that's also part of the whole age thing. It's what you need. It's not age-based. It's what you need.
Mm-hmm. And I think that when I think about the GetSetup community, I think it's a case in point. It's really living out here at GetSetup, where folks are just learning so much and ramping up at such a terrific speed with technology. It's been amazing to me to see how the growth and the enthusiasm and the sheer amount of investment in time and energy that our learners have invested in skilling up and embracing new ideas and new technology.
And it's so exciting because, like, now that everybody, who hasn't been in a Zoom meeting over the pandemic? I mean, God willing, you're not digitally excluded. And we should really talk about that too for a little bit, but I'll do that later if you decide to ask me about it. But all of a sudden you have people in the same Zoom meeting that never would have been. And so it kind of broke down the hierarchical structure in an office, and I don't think, when everybody goes back to work, I don't think the corner offices are ever going to have the same, magical allure that they once did, because it democratized things in a way that we never could have dreamed possible. And it did it at such a quick pace. I mean, it was overnight, But thankfully, all of the tools were available for us. We just needed to make them available to everybody. And it just, it was kind of like that's one of the silver linings of the pandemic, is it all of a sudden made people more accessible, and it created opportunities for more intergenerational connections.
So speak to what you were going to about the Zoom, about the.
Well, I was going to talk about digital exclusion a little bit, because, a lot of people, it's only been, I think it's certainly less than 10 years ago that over 50s didn't have smartphones. They didn't, because they got comfortable with whatever they had, if they even had one. And but during the pandemic, and as soon as the iPad was created, I mean, that was such a incredible, intuitive brainstorm by Steve Jobs, because somebody asked him, why do we need an iPad? He goes, I don't know, but he knew that it was going to be necessary, because if people didn't have the time or inclination to learn how, if they didn't have keyboard strengths or anything like that, you could still be able to communicate with people. So he kind of he was so prescient with that. I mean, having worked at Apple in the early days, I mean, I don't have enough good things to say about the importance of building user friendliness into everything, because that's the only way forward. But if you have consciously or unconsciously decided to be digitally excluded, you're really missing a trick. And so hopefully the pandemic has provided more impetus for governments to improve rural broadband, to improve access to people so that everybody can be connected, because to be disconnected today is to be disempowered. And you can't basically survive in this environment. I mean, countless stories of people who were missed out on the calls for vaccinations because they weren't on the internet, or they didn't have a smartphone, or and so when you think about it, it's no longer a nice to have, it's become a necessity. And to the extent that it becomes more and more easy to use, that it doesn't take, every bit of your brain power to try to figure out how to do something, then it will become like an appliance that you're so comfortable with. It'll be like turning on a kettle or operating a microwave, even if the only thing you know how to do is reheat. But that's what we need to do, is basically change everything so it becomes completely like an extension of your arm, instead of a impediment to anything. Hey, soon we're going to have chips in us, so who knows what's going to come around the pike next.
But staying on top of that and embracing that technology is our job if we want to stay innovative, stay active, stay engaged. We can't let the clock on the VCR keep blinking.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, that's a good one. But I mean, even the words we use, retirement is a bad word. Who wants to get tired again? It's so negative. And anybody
never thought about that. That's a great.
Yeah, and I remember when I first got associated with the age of no retirement, it was like there were flags up everywhere. What do you mean I can't retire? This is and it's not about not retiring. It's about what are you going to do with this extra time we all have, and provided that you keep yourself actively engaged and don't digitally exclude yourself and become disconnected, disempowered, and you just lose out on the social fabric of life. Because there's some new research I just read about how people were suggesting that the how the talking like this was because it wasn't three-dimensional, because you could not really feel emotion in the same way. They have kind of discounted that narrative because it is absolutely a lifeline. And ask anybody who is in a nursing home that was handed an iPad for the first time and connected with a friend that they hadn't seen or talked to in 30 years, and tell them that was not a empowering, one-dimensional conversation. And there's just no, it's wonderful. I mean, we're living in such an amazing time, and we are so fortunate. And if you don't use every single tool that's out there, then you're you're shooting yourself in the foot. And you're also, every generation blames the one before. That's a song. But every generation rethinks or remakes the world in their vision, right? We created a different world than our parents had, than our grandparents had. And by refusing to jump on the technology bandwagon, you're staying stuck you're putting yourself in a box that you don't need to be in. And at the same time, you're leaving yourself so empty of possibility and empty of looking for ways to identify what you can do, what else you want to do, and it's, and even if you're disabled, you can go on a trip on the internet. There's so many things that you can do. So anyway, I'm all about looking at, given the possibilities that we have with longevity, you don't want to look at the potential of 20, 30, 40 years of retirement in the way that we have traditionally looked at it, because that would just be a serious, that would be a misallocation of time.
So
it'd be sad.
Very sad. And so not to put ourselves in that box, but to use every tool at our disposal to break out of that box and to explore and do new things. And you talk about what is the common room? So you talk about focusing on thinking intergenerationally. What do we do about that? And what is the common room?
Okay, the common room is a project that was started by the Age of No Retirement. Because after we had done the research with 2,000 people aged 18 to 99, found all the things that were not floating their boat, that microaggressions and everything that kind of made them, bristle at life in the 21st century, we decided that we needed to go more granular. And so we did some more research, and we tried to identify the most compelling, the most motivating factor of everyone's life. And after love, it was purpose. And what we also discovered, that it was purpose aligned with the ability to earn. Now, for a lot of people, that ability to earn becomes less of a problem the older you get. But that's not so true for the people that are living longer today because of the retirement. The way that retirement was kind of foisted upon them, forced almost into retirement. Now, obviously, there's no mandatory retirement age any longer, but that was the kind of fundamental sort of lightning bulb moment, was that, okay, everybody needs purpose. And so we then decided that we would do how can we provide people with purpose? And that then became a discussion about, well, you need healthy communities, but you can't have healthy communities unless you have healthy individuals. And so these individuals, I'll use the pandemic as an example. More people have been forced into unemployment, have been forced out of their jobs, have had to reassess, have had bereavements, you name it. Everybody, I can't think of anybody that is not looking at the next 6 months, next year, and going, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what to do. And so everybody is looking for some fundamental purpose. So the common room was created as a physical space where young people could go to discover their purpose and older people could come to rediscover theirs. And so there is a series of workshops. It's called a purpose surgery, where you literally drill deep down into what matters most to you in life. What are you looking for? It's a really introspective exercise. It takes half a day. There's a number of, really very important sort of conversations that you have with yourself, and then you have with the other people that are at the purpose surgery. Then you create your purpose plan and you incubate that. And I should also say that, purpose is, how they say you've got one life to live? That's garbage. We have, how many lives have you already lived, Deb? Haven't you already had many, every time that some transition in your life happens? So to try and say that is so, again, self-limiting. So what you have to think about is, okay, I'm at this transition point in my life. It is, do I decide to go to a university, or do I decide to take an internship or just take a job because I want to make some money? Or I've just had a baby. When should I go back to work? Or I've just had a bereavement, or I've just had a divorce. I mean, every single stage of life causes you to reevaluate what your purpose is. And the intention of the common room is to have a hosted place within the community. And in our 2 live examples that were started in March of 2019, but sadly we had to close with the pandemic in March of 2020, we found that every of the 500 members that joined came from a 2-mile radius. And we didn't do any advertising or anything. We just had a sandwich board on the outside of a place on the high street to basically say, are you interested in your purpose? Come to the common room. And so it just is a very organic sort of thing. So it's a hosted environment. It's a facilitated environment. It's a clean, well-lighted place. There is, internet connection. There is, free coffee, free tea, you name it. And it is a place where people can go literally to, to find themselves, to get unstuck, and to rediscover, and find your mojo. And we're really, really hopeful that the common room is going to be opened again, as soon as we get to open. I don't know whether you saw, but in the UK, Boris Johnson announced yesterday, we're supposed to have an opening June 21st. It's been delayed another 4 weeks to open up everything. But, we're inching along. And, I'm so delighted to be talking today, because people will hear about the common room and you'll start asking your local counselor, and people in the United States are going, why don't we have common rooms? Because we're talking to people in the United States and all over England and all over the world, because during the pandemic, because we could not meet at the common rooms, and it was, again, just incubating, we decided to see what the interest would be abroad. And so we had all these international forums where people would, it would just be a Zoom meeting like this, where people in South Korea, in Colombia, in Brazil, I mean, all over the world, would talk about their pandemic experiences. And they'd also talk about what they were doing in terms of intergenerational things, or what was happening, what did they do with their older populations? And it was a really good learning experience. But what it also cemented in our minds was the importance of having a physical location where people can really feel a part of it. And so then by default, you talk about, how are we going to get economic renewal after the pandemic? Because industries have been, a lot of hospitality industries have been decimated. Storefronts, on high streets and main streets all over the country, UK and the US, have been closed. How do we rejuvenate things? Well, we have to create opportunities for people to come together. And the common room has 4 goals: for people to get a job, for you to, if you're incubating a startup idea, that you're able to do that in the confines of the safe haven of the common room. If you need an outlet for creative expression, or if you simply want to volunteer, we create the opportunities to facilitate all of those conversations with the external world. And again, if you've got healthy individuals, you'll have healthy communities, and that in turn will lead to the feedback loop between the communities and the organizations that support all these communities, so that we have an economic empowerment for everybody. And then back to the, keeping older people in work. There's a forecast, I don't know whether this is true in the US, but in the UK, that by 2035, something like 50% of the workforce will be over 60. And they'll still be working because they can't afford not to. So we really need to reconsider, reconfigure, and incentivize keeping older people in work.
So I want to be clear, make sure I'm clear about the common room. The common room is intergenerational. Is that
yes,
correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. So this is a piece of what you would maybe call the intergenerational design of a community or a society. That's kind of a broad term, that intergenerational design. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. Well, you should also think about the the common room as kind of an empowerment hub, a way of empowering people, again, it's at every transition point, every stage of your life. So it has to be accessible and available to everyone. But the intergenerational design principles really flowed out of the work that we did in 2016, back to that interviewing 2,000 people about the microaggressions in their life. And so, the whole form follows function, that was the Frank Lloyd Wright, that is now is basically the basis of design everywhere. So what happened is that we create is probably too strong a word, but we took the original principles of design and made them intergenerational. So by that I mean, we said, okay, how do we make this be? Let's not even use the word intergenerational, because intergenerational sounds so, it's hard enough to say, it's multisyllabic, and it really makes people think of, it doesn't conjure up, necessarily good things, but all age inclusive does. So if you say, let's have an all age inclusive environment, then that's great. So let me use an example before I go into the intergenerational design principles, even though we'll call them the IDPs. So I heard this example at a conference I was at that The Economist posted, or that ran about 2 or 3 years ago. And a French design agency had been tasked with looking at, Volvic, the mineral water. Do you know what I'm talking about? It's like, Evian or any of them. Volvic was a certain brand. And they saw their sales in the over 60 market drop off a cliff edge. And my first thought, because this was, they were using an example from around the global financial crisis. And I thought, well, that's obvious. That's because bottled water is a non-essential, you don't have to have bottled water. So of course that would be a discretionary expenditure that you didn't need to continue doing. But so then they did a whole bunch of focus groups, and they were trying to really max out the point, but they were showing people with the bottles of water using nail files to try to take the lids off, and they had, a picture of a person with goggles on and using a blowtorch. And so the penny dropped that the people were having difficulty with the tactile because they were having difficulty opening it. And so they redesigned the bottle, they changed the lid, they made the bottle concave so it would fit into your hand. They made it with a pebbly exterior so that it had more of a tactile response. Sales shot back up again. And so the question was posed by this researcher, to the audience, because she was asked the question, have you ever redesigned a product for an older population that negated the user experience for a younger population? And the answer was no. And so why don't we just design everything for everybody? I mean, I'll go back to my 5 children in 5 car seats, but I at one point had 5 hanging off a double stroller. So I'd have 2 in the youngest babies were in the one. I would bribe the 2 twins that would be on the outside, and then I'd have the eldest be on the T-bar, if you will. So I had 5 kind of in a pyramid in the pushchair. And so I think to myself, how different is maneuvering that to a wheelchair? And yet, we put, again, our blinkers, age, we define things by age, not by need. And so we really need to blow that all up and design everything for everybody. And by intergenerational design principle, we mean things like so that they feel safe and secure, right? Everybody wants to feel safe and secure. Everybody wants a human connection, so that every product, every service, every environment you use, that you feel that it's not just, you against the world. And if we built all this stuff into everything that we designed, I mean, it would be great. I mean, there's going to be a point where, we're not going to be able to hold months like this, and we need to be thinking about that. So clear and intuitive. How lovely would it be to have instructions for something being clear and intuitive all the time, not looking at financial services documentation or legalese that is in mice type, trying to understand it. Why can't we make things work for people? Another one is right effort. Have you ever wished that Costco packaging would be more difficult? So, really, let's make things work for people. So that means you also want to be free of time pressure. You want things to be flexible. Everybody wants things to be sustainable. You want the things to be used that you use to feel empowering. You want to be
Deb,
accessible.
I think people are compiling their own list. I'm thinking about all of the things that are made so difficult for us now. And so what role do we play as an older adult community in helping to push these intergenerational design principles, that inclusive design forward? What do we play? What role do we play?
We have to be more vocal.
Mm-hmm.
We have to, talk about it. I mean, all of the, the products that are being designed are not being designed by older people. It's changing. I mean, there is absolutely changes in the air, and that's fantastic. But, not so many years ago, the quintessential design engineer from everything from a toilet seat to a Formula One car was a 35-year-old male engineer. So, I mean, they're not really thinking about mobility devices, hearing aids, glasses. I mean, Apple is getting into the hearing aid market, and I think that's the most exciting thing. I don't mean to keep plugging Apple, but I did used to work for them. But if they could make wearing hearing aids sexier, or make it be more, not such a, badge of old, we have to get away from all that. We have to get away from boomers,
Mm-hmm.
Gen X, Gen Y, millennials. We need to dispense with that. It's too easy to categorize people. I mean, just because you were born in the baby boomers are 1946 to 64. Just because you were born in 63 doesn't mean that you are not almost a millennial, or that you identify more with the leading edge of the baby boom versus the trailing edge. I mean, these are just social structures that we have paralyzed ourselves with.
Have allowed to limit us. And I think that what you've just said is so empowering. And I'm thinking that there are quite a few questions in the chat. So I want to make sure we have time to get to those.
I'm sorry, I could rabbit on forever.
No, this is good. I hate to even say let's stop, but I do know that we've promised that we would get to those questions. So I'd like to do that. I have one from Arnita. Arnita has said, what about when your children have an expectation that you're going to assist them with their children? Babysit, take care, take to school, that sort of thing.
I mean, if that's what you want to do, then by all means do it. But it doesn't mean you still can't. That shouldn't be your responsibility. You already raised that family. I mean, this is me talking, but yes, it's great to be there to be helpful and be part of those children's lives. But do you have to be the surrogate parent? And if you do, then I wish you all the luck with that, but you still have to find some area of time when the babies are napping, or when you're at a play group or something, where you are finding, you used to do macrame, or you used to do, there's something in you. What I recommend that you do is take every decade of your life and look at everything that you've done in those decades and what you like to do. Because you like to do something in them, and it changed with your age. That's why I said you don't have just one life to live. So every single time that you think of something that I should probably explore that a little bit. Maybe even it's just reading a book. Maybe it's just listening to some podcasts. Podcasts are my new crack, I swear.
And Anne has a follow-up, a similar comment. She says, too often our adult children assume that we're not doing much with our time, or that we all see grandparenting roles the same way, their way.
I'm really hoping that I'm not a grandparent yet, but I'm hoping that by the time my children do, if they do produce, we've got girls, so it's likelihood that they might, well, they will already know that that's not what I've signed up to do. I mean, I think you have to start laying those tapes early. I mean, a lot of people absolutely love being right in the pockets of their offspring and their grandchildren and everything else. But my experience is different because I moved abroad when I was 7 months pregnant with our first. And so we didn't have any parental support anywhere. And so I think that I kind of have a very bullshit attitude about this because we didn't have anybody to rely on. And I moved to France first, and I had high school French, but that wasn't really helping me very much in terms of having 3 children under 18 months. So I think that you have to change if you want to, you have to change the expectations, and it's within your power to manage expectations, not necessarily change them, but manage them, and kind of just slowly create a new pathway for yourself so that you don't have those structures holding you back. I mean, you've got, potentially a third of your life left, which I think is just amazing. And again, it's not about the end of your life, because the end of your life, hopefully, one of the things everybody would love to have is cliff edge mortality, is that you live a great life and then you die, cliff edge mortality, not to have this, year upon year of exceeding disability and lack of independence and everything else, so stay healthy, be responsible for your own life, and dig deep, be courageous, be fearless.
And if I can add one thing that I've heard you saying as a reoccurring theme, speak up.
Yes. And like for the common room, if you want a common room, tell people, look at the common room on LinkedIn or on, I can send you stuff about it. We've got a series of 10 maps that we created saying, tell your local counselor, tell your parents, tell whatever, and they're colorful. They're really beautiful displays that were created by people in the common room about the things that they were getting from it, what they found by the nurturing environment, the opportunity to think differently, to stop putting self-imposed barriers and limitations. Because one of the things that you do in the purpose surgery is you sit there and go, well, I can't do that because of this. Like, I can't do that because of my grandkids, or I can't do that because of that. Well, let's remove, or let's change that barrier. Let's move that limitation out of the way, because many, many times they're self-imposed rather than dogmatically imposed by somebody.
Thanks for that. You kind of read my mind, because and the learners' minds here, because they're asking questions about the common room. And Leslie's made the comment that there's one in New Mexico called, or something similar, reminds her of the common room, called Teen Years, where teens teach seniors technology. But she's very, very interested in knowing more about how to get involved and how we can get that information. So you said that you have something that we can send out to
Perfect. Is she in the UK or the US or where?
In the US.
Okay. Well, again, I'm a dual citizen. I'm American, and I'd be delighted. We just actually had a conversation with the AARP, and they loved it. So,
okay. So, but we'll have things that we can send to everyone in the after class email that will provide more information. So,
yeah, no question.
That you can become more involved. And I just had a comment here, and maybe you want to, if I can find it, maybe you want to speak to it. Find it. Someone who said, oh, this is from Mary Ann. She says, I see on Quora that the Gen Xers are asking questions such as, why would anyone want to live past 50? And she says, I give them answers why.
Excellent. Yeah, because, I don't know how many in the audience are familiar with Irma Bombeck. Do you remember the syndicated columnist?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know who I'm talking about? Well, I'm going to paraphrase here, but she said, at the end of your life, you want to be able to say, I used up everything that was given to me. And I love that idea, because, we have limitless possibilities as long as we draw breath. And it is incumbent upon us to completely debunk that, why would anybody want to live past 50? it's the best. It's the best part of your life. You know, you become more of what you always were, and you were not able to necessarily show that face. And again, you know, like some people love being retired. They love every bit of it, but a lot of people don't. A lot of people get done, you know, get out of work and they go, whew, that was great. You know, I love this. I'm going to just put my feet up, you know, and they could be satisfied with that. But many, many people about 3 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years in, they're going, wait a minute, you know, there's more. And there is more. And I love that. And you just need to be, you need to be courageous, and you need to believe in yourself enough to say, I can do something different.
Good. And I see that CF Frank is saying he's really excited. Send me more information on the common room. I'd like to set up something similar here in my city. So this has really resonated very much with the group, and this idea of finding purpose, just like your very first session was a sandwich board, and you had such a great response. Well, you just put your sandwich board up here in the GetSetup room, and I think that we've seen a huge response to that and interest in it. So that's very,
and that warms the cockles of my heart. And again, what I love about it is the connection to your ability to earn, because again, for a lot of older people, the prospect of a traditional retirement with, you know, going off on cruise and golfing every day is not their reality. And so, you know, that has to be a condition of the third of your life, needs to be to find purpose.
yeah. I have just one other comment that jumps out at me, that someone who said that they retired, let me see if I can find it, they retired but didn't even want to talk about it because it was, Anita said, I had to keep my retirement secret from my friends because they talked so negative about retirement.
They talk negative about it. I wonder, because they didn't want to retire, or because they were so unfulfilled in retirement. Yeah. So
retire, Arnita, is that the case? Didn't want to retire? I'm watching you shake your head. You can unmute yourself and say that.
They didn't want to retire. They were all executives, and I was a manager too, but I did other things during my work life. I volunteered, you know, several hours a week, and I took my children with me. So I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to do the next 30 or 35 years volunteering, doing something else, living a purpose, doing things for other people, because I had done all the right things in order to do that. But my friends they looked at it as like,
and again, that's because a lot of them, you know, have been so again focused only on the grim struggle. You know what, you know, what their job was, keeping that job, keeping everything, keeping the wheels on. And when you get the opportunity to look, to even peek over at the other side, there's so much opportunity. And I should also mention the other social enterprise that I'm with, Encore Fellows UK. It started in the United States, and it came out of Civic Ventures out of Berkeley, California. But the whole idea was to take people coming up to retirement and transition them into work in the third sector, in the volunteer sector. And for many of the people that, again, have been working their whole lives, the only way that they had anything to do with the volunteer sector or the third sector was to write a check for you know, wear a poppy. You know, they didn't understand what the work in the third sector was. And so it was making connections between people's skills, experience, talents, wisdom, everything they'd accumulated during their working life, and bringing it to the charity sector. And that's been very, very positive. So Encore is something else that is very, very, I'm sure Marcy Albaher was on GetSetup, and she talked about it, I bet, because it's a very vibrant organization in the United States, encore.org. And I am part of Encore Fellows UK. We're trying to take the model and bring it to the UK, and we're having some success. So I love seeing the messages about the common room. I'm on fire about this. This is fabulous. And also for people with disabilities, we have to make sure that we don't negate that. And also from an intergenerational design principle stand, a friend of mine, Fiona Jarvis, she has MS, she's in a scooter. And for a design challenge, she created a, she's in a scooter, right? And so she created a handle, if you will, that her wine glass would fit into, because none of the scooters, mobility scooters or anything else had something like that. They had like a mug holder, but nothing that a wine glass would fit into. And so, you know, people with disabilities drink wine. You know, why can't they have if you're in a wheelchair, why can't you have a place to put your wine glass or whatever? So we have to really, really think about making design work for everybody, because design can enable or disable us. That was Patty Ward.
Thank you. This has been great. Deb, this really has been a fascinating conversation. And having you here today, I think that we can see from the comments that people are just so engaged with your topic and with you. So we want to thank you so much for coming.
I am delighted to have had this opportunity and this great forum with GetSetup to be able to get the word out. Because again, you know, I've got one voice that I get to we're having a dyadic conversation, but we've now created a hyperdyad, and that is what I want. You know, get the word out.
Get the word out. So that's what we're doing, and we're going to keep doing it. So we'll have this on recording, and we will have lots of opportunities for you to rewatch this and invite your friends to watch it as well. And to continue learning more about intergenerational design, you can check out the Age of No Requirement. We're going to send you a link in the email that follows this session. And you can also check out an upcoming event by encore.org, where Deb also does some research, and that's called Co-Generate, and it's about intergenerational collaboration. Again, we're going to provide you with the link for that. And you can also see those in the chat, and you can check them out there, but know that you'll get them in the email after the session. You can record or request a recording of this event too. Now it will be played several times, but you can request the recording just by emailing support@help@getsetup.io. And if you're new to GetSetup today, we hope that you've gotten a taste for what we do, and that you'll join us for more classes. We have over 400 online classes weekly, all designed for older adults and taught by older adults. The classes are free because we work with local governments and with community and Medicare organizations who support their members with free classes. So it's really, really very wonderful. And we have a vast scope of classes that we offer. So I believe there's really something for everyone. And so if you like this event, one of our other classes might be for you too. So look for the link to sign up in the chat here on Zoom, in our live streams, and at www.getsetup.org. So you can check out our other offerings. And remember, you're going to get that email. If you registered for this class, you'll get the email with the link and the notes, and also with some relevant classes that you might be interested in. We are really looking forward to seeing all of you in some future class. Thank you so much for coming today. And do we want to, let me just check. No. Okay. So I think that that's it. Unless Liz, I'll ask you, do you want to go for a photo? Okay, if you want to stay online and you'd put yourself on camera, we would love that, and we'd love to take a final photo. It's wonderful.